Okay, so we're going to be on page number 245 in the books. Um, I don't have any extra books though. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Literally. Page 245 in the books, we're talking about the fruit of the Enlightenment. And I'm going to go over one aspect on the French Revolution as compared to the American Revolution. Next week, I will do the American Revolution. We'll have enough to go over with the French Revolution. Now, what we had done over the last couple of weeks was to just get an understanding of the framework of history, so that what we're looking at today. Now, we looked at church history going all the way back to 33 A.D., and but now we're up at the end of the book, and what we've done is looked at how churches developed over that time and how different denominations came about because of that. In this modern time, the issues that we're looking at have been, we talked about the charismatic movement and how that became a prominent branch of church movements. Then we talked about the German rationalism and how that led into the liberal mentality. And by liberal, when we think of the word liberal, we think of something like giving to people liberally. Like if we had a big pot of chili, we would put a liberal amount. We'd say, oh, let's put a whole lot of chili in there. But that's not what's meant by liberalism. Okay, liberalism was taking liberties with the Bible and assuming things like that there were contradictions, that there were mythologies in the Bible, and that's where you're taking too much freedom. In fact, that kind of liberalism, we would really look at that as libertinism. Libertinism is somebody who is a jerk in the liberties that they take. Libertine will. A libertine would, if you offer to him, very selfish. Yeah, if you offered him something, he'd help himself and say, "Oh, I'll take it all." If you offer him a piece of pie, he would cut out a piece of pie, put it on the side, and then he'd take the pie. And that's being a libertine, as opposed to being a liberal. And so so that was liberalism. Then we want to get to where we're talking about where our church sort of fits in, which would be in fundamentalism, which says let's go back to the Bible, let's base everything on the Bible. Who'd have thought that we should go back to the Bible in church, right? That's a joke. But of course, that's what we would do. So now we're looking at the next historical moment, which would be how the American Revolution really provided for true liberty, freedom of the church. Okay, so that we are free to operate. We can talk to whoever we want to and not expect to be put in jail. Now, this is what's happening over in Great Britain today, is that they are having great assaults on their freedom of speech. They don't have freedom of speech like we do. Our freedom of speech is in the Constitution, so that we have that and we can talk to people. But that is not the way it is over there. Somebody was, I saw, and this was a very prominent headline, somebody was put in jail because he's called somebody else a Muppet. Okay, a Muppet. Okay, now over there, they use the word Muppet to describe somebody who's a fool or somebody who's foolish. You can go to jail just for saying, "Oh, that guy's a fool over there," and yet that is the depth to which they are abusing people over there. So how do we get our freedom of speech? Well, before we get to the American Revolution, like I said, which will be next week, that will talk about how we have freedom of religion, you have you have the American Revolution to compare with the French Revolution. The French Revolution and the American Revolution were both products of the Age of Enlightenment. The Age of Enlightenment, where science was becoming more prominent, where philosophy was becoming more prominent. They were getting away from the abuse of churches at that time, which were being very abusive, very oppressive. They were getting away from that oppression, saying you all have to think the way we say you have to think, and so they started studying things more. Now, unfortunately, I had gone through a whole history of how that had developed, getting up to the Age of Enlightenment last week, but we have. We have many things that come down to us because of the Enlightenment. So on page 245, we're looking at paragraph 715. The Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Enlightenment, was an intellectual and philosophical movement. It began in the 1700s. In the late 17th century would be the late 1600s, which was right before our American Revolution. So there was a lot of philosophers started speaking about government and how it should be, how we're not supposed to have kings that are ruling over us, but that we should have government of the people and by the people and for the people. Abraham Lincoln was the one who talked about that. Okay, so instead of having a king ruling over us, we elect our president, right? Okay, so that's government of the people. Government comes from us, not from a king who is using his military to set himself up as the boss. Okay, so it's characterized by an emphasis, and this is significant, an emphasis on reason, science, empiricism, and the promotion of individual liberty and rights. So reason and science. Empiricism is where we take all kinds of things that we look at and we figure out what's going on. Okay, so it appeared to seek greater liberty in thinking. Yeah, it seemed to be that way. But when that kind of thinking, when that kind of reason goes to too much excess, instead it enslaves our thinking. And I'm going to explain how that happens. It's associated with, and this is paragraph 716, intellectual arrogance that presumes that scientific authority, that we must all certainly admit that scientists must know more than we do. Now, scientists can know all kinds of things, but people will talk about the science is settled and it's concluded things. All the smart men got together and they did all these studies and they were able to figure out that this is true. Except anybody who says that does not understand science. Science is never settled. Science is built on examining the evidence, guessing at what it all means, and then seeing if they can repeat the same process to get the same results. And they don't often do. One of the big things that we're looking at today was everybody was all concluding that the science was settled. Everybody should get vaccinated with the COVID vaccination. And the scientists have it all figured out, and they've decided and they've studied it out, and so that's what's true. But what they ignored, by saying the science was settled, now everybody's forced to get the vaccine, they were not telling you about how many people developed heart problems from having the vaccine. And in fact, that's what's happened in the government recently, where all the people who think that science is the end of everything and that they know everything, they'll say, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're anti-vaccinations. No, we're just saying that there could be some problems. Let's see what more the studies have, and then they actually find out that scientists would suppress evidence in order to favor their own conclusions. So science doesn't know it all. Arrogant people think that science knows it all.
Pastor?
Hang on just a second. I want to do one thing. Okay. I'm trying to fix one thing here. Okay. Got it. Okay. Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, we were told anytime there was a question raised, trust the science.
Yeah, trust the science. Yeah, which science? Okay. Some people talk about the Big Bang for starting the universe. Google it sometime for Google for the Big Bang, what the criticisms are of the Big Bang. It's not settled science. Some people will talk about how we need to do radiocarbon dating, and in order to tell that things are millions of years old. But if you actually read the science, radiocarbon dating is limited to being reliable, I think, up to only like 10,000 years. And even then, there's issues with it. So these things are not so settled. So the Enlightenment was actually a blessing in many ways. First of all, let me talk about some of the positive things of the Enlightenment. Out of the Enlightenment, we have from government natural rights. Okay, we said that we have rights that are given to us by God: life and liberty and guaranteed happiness. No, the pursuit of happiness. Okay, the happiness, the government can't guarantee it. So life, liberty, and property, and we have a right to this, no matter what the government says. And if the government says, okay, we restrict people from being able to move from state to state, you have to have a passport to go from New Jersey to Delaware or New Jersey to Pennsylvania, and they would say, well, the government would say, we give you that right. No, we've got the right to move around on our own. The government does not give us rights. The government protects our rights. But before the Enlightenment, there was a lot of oppression that was going on. Okay, we have, because the Enlightenment, we don't suffer from the whims of a king. We have the rule of law and equality before the law. This is Enlightenment thinking that was brought in. And that's real common to people today. Everybody just thinks, oh yeah, we've got laws. Well, before time, you had a king dictating the way things would be. With the Enlightenment, we had a growth of science. Science grew phenomenally because they were looking at reason. Philosophy and ethics, public education, that everybody deserved to learn things because they wanted to promote education. Okay, however, that certainly did give us a lot of benefits, but if you press the idea of reason too much, you can get arrogant, and there can be some problems with that, because men started saying, well, we don't need God. We have science. What do we need God for? We can figure things out scientifically. We don't need to pray to God. And so we will figure out medicines ourselves because we have reason to be able to do that. The trouble is, there's a bunch of diseases that medicine can't handle, and there's been a lot of times when people have prayed and God has healed them in spite of the medicine. But excessive rationalism, excessive reason could lift somebody up to being too prideful, thinking that they know it all when they just don't. Okay, in fact, in paragraph 718, when we are criticizing the Enlightenment, it can seem like we're being anti-science. No, we're not anti-science. It's the excessive trust in rationality that's going to be the chief problem. Hyper-rationality will bring in doubts that make us weaker and outright and have an outright denial of God in churches. Okay, so the Tale of Two Revolutions, paragraph 719. The French Revolution and the American Revolution grew out of the Enlightenment, but along two different paths. We're looking at the French Revolution today. The outcome will be the promotion of the kingdom of the world versus, and the kingdom of the world that wants to control us, versus the promotion of the kingdom of God that frees us in our thinking. Today, people will talk about the scientists having a consensus. Having a consensus means they all agree. Well, you can have 1,000 scientists agree that the world is going to end because of climate change. But it's not. It's not. Just because they have a consensus. That idea of coming to consensus means that people essentially are voting on what is truth. So let's take a vote. Everybody raise your hands for this vote, please, okay, to help me out with my illustration. I vote that the climate is going to burn everybody up. How many people vote with me? Everybody vote. Lift your hand, lift your hand. You got to vote with me. Make it unanimous here. Lift your hand, lift your hand. Okay. Does that make it so? No. What if we vote that people with blue eyes should be in control of the world? I like that one. How many people vote for that, all you blue-eyed people? Okay, good. You got blue eyes? I got hazel eyes. Okay, yeah, I like that. So now I can be boss over everybody. Just because we have a consensus, just because we vote on it, doesn't make it true. And this is what happens in government that is at risk. Just because the government votes on something doesn't make it actually true. So what it does is it stifles thought. It stops people from thinking. You're not allowed to disagree. Because why? We voted on it. Okay? We voted on it, so that makes it true. You're not allowed to disagree. And if you disagree, we're going to put you in jail. And yes, that actually happens. People will get put in jail because they're disagreeing with what everybody voted on. Okay, so because of this, in the French Revolution, they made reason the ultimate, and it led to what was called the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror is just what I explained. You vote that all the blue-eyed people get to decide everything, and if you disagree, I get to rain terror down on you. I get to chop your head off with the guillotine. Now, that putting it that way could sound a little bit odd, but that's exactly what happened. And why? Because people disagreed with what they said. Okay, while the intention of the Enlightenment was to liberate man, in its excess, it only served to liberate him from God and turn him over to being subservient to governance by the collective mentality of the state. When we say collective mentality of the state, we're talking about we're going to have a collection of the votes. And so that collection of that collective mentality stops people from being able to think on their own. The state of political correctness is what we're talking about. Political correctness says, well, you're. Somebody give me an example of political correctness. I'm trying to think of some statements. I'm on coming up with something on my own here. Okay. Okay, let me see. Some examples of political correctness. Okay. We're not allowed to talk about illegal immigrants, right? Now you have to say undocumented immigrants. Why? Because that is considered politically incorrect. It's not nice to say in social areas. You can't talk about somebody being disabled. You have to say differently abled. Okay? You're not allowed to talk about a Christmas tree. People say, "Oh, I'm offended by that because I'm not a Christian." You can't say Christmas tree. Okay, holiday tree. Does that make it any better? You can't say a prisoner. You have to say an incarcerated person. You can't say juvenile offender. You have to say a justice-involved youth. All youths are justice involved. They all have to obey the laws. Okay.
Pastor?
Yeah.
Do you see this continuing theme that Orwell warned about?
Yes.
Everything you're saying is called newspeak in his book way years ago when he warned about it.
Yes. Okay. Cash, this is one for you. At some point in your reading, the book 1984 is very interesting reading. So try to remember that for him. Okay. So in 1984 by George Orwell. It was written well before 1984. That was the future. 1984 was the future when it was written back in the 1940s.
Oh, Pastor?
Yeah.
And one other thing I thought of earlier with that, what else England is trying to force more of Orwellian themes besides freedom of speech. Remember in Orwell's book, The Thought Police, you got to be careful what you think, because that lady who was standing in front of, I think it was an abortion clinic, she was just standing outside. Now, if you're the cops, you know what she's doing.
Yeah.
She didn't have any protest signs, anything like that. She was praying silently to herself, just standing there. And you know, if you're the police, you also know that type of person isn't going to lie to you when you ask them what they're doing. So they walked up to her and they said, "Excuse me, ma'am, what are you doing?" And she answered them. She didn't give them a lie or anything to protect herself. She said, "I'm praying."
Yeah. And
they said, "Sorry, ma'am, you can't do that. You're under arrest."
Right. You can't even think. You're not allowed to think. Today, you don't have people who are arrested. No, they are disappeared. Okay, I hate that one. And they're not killed. They are unalived. I'm going to unalive you. Okay, yeah, and that's because the collective mentality. Everybody's got to agree on this one thing. It takes away our freedoms. Okay, so here's how it came down, and you can read, especially paragraph 721 goes into that more. Secular humanism and the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. Humanism says everything's centered on man. Okay, forget God. At first, it was like, well, we don't need to have a priest thinking for us. We're human beings. We can think for ourselves. Then it grew into secular humanism. You have the secular and the sacred. The sacred exists in church. That's where we have the sacred. Okay, it's holy. It's sacred to God. Secular means it's out in the world without God. So secular humanism is mankind trying to live without God. trying to live out in the world. The secular humanism of the Enlightenment became the foundation of the French Revolution and then the Reign of Terror that came about. There were 3 estates. Now, Cash, this is what you're going to be able to use in school. This next part is all just history, and sometime in school, if they start talking about the French Revolution, if you can remember this, you'll be very smart. Okay, the teacher will think you're very smart. There were what you called 3 estates in France. The first estate was composed of the clergy and the church. That was the first group that that helped organize society. The clergy, the preachers, and the church. The second estate, the second group that made up France, was made up of the nobles, the aristocrats, and the royalty. So who were the bosses? This is paragraph 723. There was the church and its leaders, and then you had the king and its leaders. There was a third estate. The third estate was everybody else. It was made up of the middle class, the peasants, the people that worked in the cities. Now, there were more people in the third estate. No, there's not many rich people in the second estate, but there's a lot of people in the third estate. But even though there were 10 times as much people in the third estate, they didn't have any political power. So, paragraph 724, French society characterized by inequality between the different estates. This was broken down by the Enlightenment ideals that no, everybody can think for themselves. However, instead of having people just being responsible to God, they said, you've got to be responsible to the government and to the collective mindset. So what they did was they said, well, we have all these rich people in the second estate. Let's take their money. Okay? Let's spread the money out to everybody else. Let's take the power away from the church. In fact, because the church was based on faith and they wanted to be based on reason instead, they canceled the churches. They took, and I mentioned this before, they took away the 7-day work week. Well, why did they do that? Because the 7-day work week was established in the Bible. God worked 6 days, and on the 7th day, he rested. That was the pattern that we had. So they made it. They wanted to go to the decimal system, and they wanted to go to the metric system. They applied it to the days of the week, and they said, we're going to have a 10-day work week. So now you had to work 9 days instead of 6 before you got a rest. Well, you can tell that this didn't work out. They went back to a 7-day week later on. But they also tried. They also went after the priests, kicked them out of the churches, and stopped the churches from operating. Then, when that didn't work enough because they weren't getting enough equality, they weren't getting all the money passed on to them. Paragraph 727, they talked about liberté and égalité, or liberty and equality. What they meant by equality was not the equal value of a person, but the equal wealth of a person. So, for instance, I can't say to Tony, I'm better than you are, okay? No, we have equality. Before God, we're the same. We're just as valuable. So Donna is just as good as Kathy before God. Now, I'm not going to ask about your bank accounts, okay? Because that's what they were thinking in France was, do you have equal bank accounts? So if you compare your bank accounts, and whoever has more money, you have to give half of the excess to the other person. Okay? That's the way the French Revolution was thinking. And so that's when they came out with the guillotine. What this ended up with was It was the people that were calling for liberty and equality. Instead, they became the new oppressors. They killed off their old oppressors in the church and in the monarchy, and now they were the ones in charge. And the only way they could keep their power is if they were the ones who were oppressing and killing everybody off. Okay, this is what happens when you have political correctness run amok. It means that everybody has to think the same thing as people voted on it. Whatever people voted on it, that was the new truth. Now, people voting on the new truth, okay? Now, let me give this one to Cash, okay? Can you tell me, Cash, for an example, what is 2 plus 2? Okay. How many people vote that 2 plus 2 is 5 when it comes to your paycheck? When it comes to your paycheck, okay? In other words, I might work 2 hours one day and 2 hours the next day, but I don't want you to pay me for 4 hours. Let's vote on it. I want you to pay me for 5 hours. You see how it doesn't work? You can't vote on truth. No, 2 plus 2 is still equal to 4. Cash, keep that in mind when you go to math class. Okay. You're beyond 2 plus 2 though, right? Okay. So, however much people want to vote on things to make their society, the reason that this is a problem, now, this is just explaining it from the French Revolution. This is where this was being introduced. This became the basis for communism. This is the principles that communism, which is godless, which destroys churches, and it forces people to distribute their wealth, and it forces people to think alike. This is what the book 1984 was all about. All the newspeak, all the political correctness. That's communism. What we're going to see next week is how in the American Revolution, we didn't want people to be equal in wealth. We wanted people to be equal in worth. We wanted to have people free to think, but they were responsible to God, not to the votes of people who would then oppress them. Now, there's one more stage why this is so important. Because this mentality in the French Revolution, which becomes the mentality for communism, is going to be the mentality that the Antichrist is going to use in the tribulation. This whole thinking, this world kingdom, this kingdom of the world, of a world without God, starts with the French Revolution, moves to communism, and it becomes used by the Antichrist. The American Revolution is going to take a different path. Both the French Revolution and the American Revolution were fueled by the Enlightenment that said, let's think and let's use some reason. The French Revolution went too far and assumed that man's wisdom was infallible. The American Revolution said man is free to think and be responsible to God, not the government. And we're going to show that next week. Let me ask if there's any questions, any comments. Okay. These lessons are being recorded. If you want to say, now how did that work out again? You can see the recording of this lesson online. Yes, Miss Donna.
You can see that today, though, with the move away from God and the government and political correctness, and people. I'm surprised people don't chop off other people's heads because they're not agreeable with what the government says.
Yeah.
Especially in the past 4 years.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like how on Easter Sunday, I think it was last year, the administration would not recognize Easter Sunday. They made it day of transgender visibility or something like that. And it's not heads that they were chopping off either. So it becomes exactly what you're saying, and that's why we like it when leaders in government, when they start talking about God and thinking about God instead of getting rid of God and stifling the churches. They might not be perfect in all religious aspects, but being responsible to God becomes the thing that's important. Yeah. Somebody else.
Pastor?
Yes, sir.
Yes, another thing that the ubiquitous they do, especially to suppress question and challenge in the scientific realm, they'll make a proclamation about something, and to prevent anybody from challenging, they'll say 50 million years ago, 100 million, 500 million years ago. And when you do that, there's nothing anybody can do to challenge that. You know what I mean? Like, it stops right there.
Right.
However, if we try to look up history, any kind of history on this planet around just 50,000 years ago, see what you come up with.
Yeah.
There isn't any.
Yeah.
No recorded histories. So what happened? Where's all these millions and millions of years and billions of years? It's all thought control.
Indeed. Okay. Somebody else. Well, okay. We'll let Stanley have the last word on that. Let's go ahead and pray.